I taught sign language for 31 years at the Oregon School for the Deaf in Salem. I retired in 2019, thinking I'd spend my golden years gardening and reading mystery novels. Instead, I spent them communicating with a creature that shouldn't exist, learning secrets about humanity that have kept me awake every night since. And now, watching the news, watching the world unfold exactly as I was warned it would, I understand why I was chosen to hear this message. My name is Eleanor Marsh. I'm 73 years old, and for the past 5 years, I've been having conversations with a Bigfoot in the Cascade Mountains using American Sign Language. What it told me about our future, about what's coming for all of us, is happening right now, and I can't stay silent anymore. Let me start at the beginning because this story deserves to be told properly. In the summer of 2019, 3 months after I'd cleaned out my desk at the school and said goodbye to colleagues I'd worked alongside for 3 decades, my husband Robert died of a heart attack while we were eating breakfast. One moment he was spreading jam on his toast and complaining about the Mariners losing again, and the next he was slumped over, gone before the paramedics could even arrive. 44 years of marriage ended between one heartbeat and the next. I couldn't stay in our house after that. Every corner held a memory. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like his footsteps. My daughter Melissa, who lives in Seattle with her family, wanted me to move closer to her, but I needed something else entirely. I needed silence. I needed to be somewhere Robert had never been, somewhere that held no memories of him. That's how I ended up buying a small cabin near the town of Estacada, about 40 miles southeast of Portland. The property was 20 acres of dense Douglas fir and western hemlock, bordered on one side by the Clackamas River and on the other by thousands of acres of national forest. The cabin itself was modest, built in the 1960s with a wood stove, a hand pump for water, and electricity that worked most of the time. My daughter thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But in my grief, the isolation felt like exactly what I needed. I moved in during September of 2019, just as the leaves were beginning to turn. The first few weeks were the hardest. The silence I'd craved became oppressive. Without Robert's voice, without the daily interactions with students and colleagues, I felt like I was slowly disappearing. I started taking long walks in the forest, following deer trails and old logging roads, just to have something to do with my body while my mind processed the enormity of my loss. It was during one of these walks, in early October, that I first saw something unusual. I was about 2 miles from my cabin, sitting on a fallen log near a small creek, when I noticed movement in my peripheral vision. I turned, expecting to see a deer or maybe a black bear, and instead saw a shape between the trees that made no sense. It was tall, impossibly tall, at least 8 feet, and covered in dark reddish-brown hair. It was watching me from behind a massive cedar, only partially visible but unmistakably there. I should have been terrified. Any rational person would have been. But something about my state of mind in those grief-soaked days made fear seem irrelevant. What was there to be afraid of? The worst had already happened. Robert was gone. Nothing could hurt me more than that. So instead of running, I simply looked back at the creature. We stared at each other for what must have been 2 full minutes. I could see its eyes, dark and intelligent, tracking my every movement. Then, slowly, it retreated deeper into the forest and disappeared. I walked home in a daze, unsure if what I'd seen was real or some manifestation of my grieving mind. But I couldn't shake the memory of those eyes. There had been something in them, something that felt familiar. Not threat, not aggression, but curiosity, maybe even loneliness. Over the next few weeks, I kept returning to that same area of the forest. I'd sit on that fallen log and wait, sometimes for hours, hoping for another glimpse. Most days, nothing happened. The forest went about its business, birds singing, squirrels chattering, the creek flowing endlessly over smooth stones. But occasionally, maybe once a week, I'd catch a glimpse of that massive shape watching me from the shadows. In late October, I decided to try something. Before each visit to the forest, I started bringing food. Apples from the small orchard behind my cabin, nuts I'd collected from a nearby hazelnut tree, wild blackberries I'd picked and dried. I'd leave them on a flat rock near the creek before I sat down to wait. The first few times, the food was still there when I left. But then, one gray November morning, I arrived to find the offerings gone, and in their place, arranged carefully on the rock, were 3 perfect pine cones and a sprig of evergreen. The creature was communicating. It was reciprocating. That realization changed everything. As a sign language teacher, my entire career had been built on the premise that communication transcends the barriers most people assume are insurmountable. I'd taught profoundly deaf children to express themselves, to connect with the hearing world, to make themselves understood when society assumed they couldn't be. If there was one thing I knew with certainty, it was that the desire to communicate is universal. And this creature, whatever it was, had that desire. I started leaving more elaborate offerings, varying the foods, sometimes including objects, a piece of colored glass, a brass button, a small mirror. The creature always took everything and always left something in return. Interesting stones, feathers, once a perfectly preserved owl pellet. We were building a vocabulary of exchange, a foundation of trust. Then, on a cold morning in mid-December, the creature showed itself fully for the first time. I'd arrived at our meeting spot earlier than usual, just as dawn was breaking. The forest was quiet, blanketed in a light frost that made everything sparkle. I was arranging my offerings on the rock when I heard movement behind me, heavy footfalls that made no attempt at stealth. I turned slowly, and there it was, standing in the open not 30 feet away. The creature was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Female, I realized, based on certain physical characteristics, though I wasn't certain at first. She stood approximately 8 feet tall, with shoulders broader than any human's, arms that hung past her knees, and massive hands that looked capable of crushing stone. Her face was remarkable, not quite human, not quite ape, but something in between. A heavy brow ridge, a broad, flat nose, expressive lips, and those eyes, deep brown and filled with intelligence. She watched me watching her. Neither of us moved. Then, purely on instinct, I did something that would change both our lives. I raised my hands and signed the most basic greeting in American Sign Language. "Hello, my name Eleanor." The creature's head tilted. She studied my hands with an intensity that made my heart race. I repeated the signs, slower this time, more deliberately. "Hello, my name Eleanor." What happened next still gives me chills when I think about it. The creature raised her own massive hands and attempted to mimic my movements. The execution was clumsy, her fingers not designed for the fine motor control that sign language requires, but the intent was unmistakable. She was trying to communicate back. I spent the rest of that morning teaching her. We stood there in the frost-covered forest, an elderly deaf education specialist and an 8-foot-tall cryptid, working through the basics of human language. She was an incredibly fast learner. By the time I had to leave, numbed by the cold and lightheaded from forgetting to eat, she could sign her version of hello. She had learned the sign for name, and she had created her own sign for herself, a gesture that combined the signs for Forest and Walker. I called her Walker from that day forward. The winter of 2019 into 2020 was the coldest on record for that part of Oregon. Snow fell heavily in the mountains, making the trails to our meeting spot treacherous. But I went anyway, sometimes through knee-deep snow, driven by a need to continue what we'd started. Walker was always there waiting for me, no matter how bad the weather. She seemed impervious to the cold, her thick hair providing insulation that I could only envy as I shivered in my layers of thermal clothing. Our communication improved rapidly. Walker's hands, though large, proved surprisingly dexterous. She adapted standard signs to fit her anatomy, creating a kind of pigeon sign language that we both understood. Within a month, she could express basic concepts: food, water, cold, warm, tree, animal. By the end of January, we'd moved on to more abstract ideas. Good, bad, before, after, same, different. In early February, she signed something that stopped me cold. My people, far, few. I asked her to repeat it. She did, adding more. My people, before many, now few, hiding, afraid. There were others like her, a population small and scattered, living in the deepest parts of the Pacific Northwest wilderness, and they were declining. I asked why. Why few? Why afraid? She pointed at me, then made a sign I didn't recognize, a quick flick of her fingers near her temple. I shook my head to indicate I didn't understand. She tried again, more slowly. The sign seemed to indicate something fast, something sudden, something dangerous. Human, she finally signed, using the word I'd taught her. Human take, human destroy, human not see Walker people. Good, human see, human kill. The history she shared over the following weeks was heartbreaking. Her people, the beings that humans called Bigfoot or Sasquatch, had once numbered in the thousands across North America. They'd lived in relative peace with indigenous peoples who respected their existence and kept their secret. But European colonization had changed everything. Logging destroyed their habitat. Hunters shot at them. Those who were captured or killed became trophies or curiosities. Her people had learned over generations that survival meant invisibility. Walker herself was approximately 45 years old, middle-aged by her species' standards. She'd been born in the 1970s in a remote area of the Olympic Peninsula, part of a family group of 12. By the time I met her, she was alone. Her parents had died in the 1990s, her siblings had scattered to find mates and territory, and her own mate had been killed by a hunter in 2004. She'd spent the last 15 years in solitary existence, too isolated to find another of her kind, too scared to reveal herself to humans. Until me. Why me? I asked her one day in early March, as the first hints of spring began to show in the forest. Why show yourself to me? She considered the question for a long time. Then she signed something that made me cry. You sit alone. You sad. You not afraid. You like Walker. Both alone. She had recognized grief in me, recognized loneliness, recognized a kindred spirit struggling with loss. In her isolation, she had watched enough humans to know that most would react to her with fear or violence. But she had seen something different in me, a brokenness that matched her own. The pandemic of 2020 changed everything and nothing. The world shut down, but my corner of it remained the same. The forest didn't know or care about a virus spreading through human populations. Walker and I continued our meetings, our conversations growing deeper and more complex as our shared language expanded. I taught her hundreds of signs, and she taught me things about the forest, about survival, about the deep time of the wilderness that made human concerns seem small and temporary. It was during those pandemic months, when the rest of humanity was locked in their homes, that Walker first began to warn me. It started with observations about changes she'd noticed in the forest. The animals were behaving strangely, she told me. Migration patterns were shifting. Species that had never lived this far north were appearing. The seasons felt wrong, arriving too early or too late, breaking patterns that had held for as long as her people's memory stretched. Human make world sick, she signed one afternoon in July of 2020, her face grave. Not virus sick, different sick, hot sick, climate change. She was describing climate change, though not in those words. She explained that her people had oral histories going back thousands of years, passed down through generations, describing the rhythms of the natural world. Those rhythms were breaking. The old songs, the ones that predicted when salmon would run, and when berries would ripen, and when snow would fall, were becoming unreliable. But that was only the beginning of what she wanted to tell me. Over the course of that summer and fall, Walker shared with me a warning that her people had been passing down for generations. It wasn't just climate change. It wasn't just habitat destruction. It was something deeper, something her people had observed about human behavior that they believed would eventually lead to catastrophe. "Humans always want more," she signed to me on a cool October evening, the setting sun painting the forest in shades of amber. Never enough. More food when belly full, more things when hands full, more power when already strong. This sickness, this make everything else sick. I asked her to explain. She spent hours across multiple meetings trying to convey a concept that her people understood instinctively, but that was difficult to express in human language. The gist of it was this: her people had watched humanity for thousands of years. They'd seen us develop agriculture, build cities, create technologies that gave us godlike power over the natural world. And through all of that, they'd observed a pattern. Humans never reached a point of sufficiency. No matter how much we had, we wanted more. And that wanting, that endless hunger for more, was creating cascading effects that would eventually make the planet uninhabitable for most complex life. Walker people watch, she told me. Long time watch. See pattern. Human grow, human take, human break, human suffer, then grow again, take again, break again, each time bigger, each time worse. Her people had concluded that humanity was trapped in a cycle, a spiral of growth and collapse that was accelerating with each iteration. Now, she signed, pressing her massive hand against a tree trunk. Biggest break coming, maybe last break. Human make world too sick to heal. I wanted to dismiss this as the philosophy of a primitive creature who didn't understand modern civilization, but I couldn't. I'd lived through enough of human history to know she wasn't entirely wrong. The Great Depression, World War II, the Cold War, the financial crisis of 2008. Each disaster seemed to follow a period of excess, and each recovery seemed to set the stage for an even larger catastrophe down the line. What I didn't expect was how specific her warnings would become. In the spring of 2021, as the world began to emerge from pandemic lockdowns, Walker told me something that seemed impossible at the time. "Humans make thinking machines," she signed. I had never discussed computers or artificial intelligence with her. I had no idea how she could know about such things. Machines think fast, faster than human. Human not understand machine. Machine not understand human. But machine change everything. Machine make humans split. I asked her what she meant by split. She struggled to explain. Human already fight, she signed. Different groups, different ideas. Machines make worse. Machines show each human different world. Each human think their world true, but all different. Cannot talk, cannot agree, cannot solve problems. She was describing social media algorithms, I realized with a chill. Filter bubbles. The way technology was dividing humanity into increasingly hostile tribes, each convinced that their version of reality was the only true one. But how could she possibly know about this? Watch human long time, she explained when I asked. Watch human in forests, in mountains, near cities, hear human talk. See human with small, bright boxes, smartphones. She'd observed humans using smartphones, seen how we stared at them constantly, watched how they changed our behavior. Before bright boxes, human in forest talked to each other, she continued. Look at trees, look at animals. Now human in forest, look only at box. Walk into trees, not see world, only see box. Her people had been observing us as we transformed ourselves, watching from the shadows as humanity became increasingly disconnected from the physical world and increasingly connected to virtual ones. But Walker's warnings went beyond technology. In the summer of 2021, she told me about changes her people had detected in the natural world that she said were warnings of something catastrophic approaching. Earth angry, she signed one day, her face more serious than I'd ever seen it. Not angry like animal angry, different, big angry, deep angry, coming up from below. I asked her to explain. What she described was terrifying. Her people could sense things that humans couldn't. They felt vibrations in the earth, detected subtle changes in the behavior of animals and plants, perceived patterns in weather and water and wind that formed a kind of language. And that language was telling them that the planet itself was approaching some kind of tipping point. Human take too much, she signed. Burn too much, poison too much. Earth tries to heal, cannot heal fast enough. Now Earth pushing back. She predicted that the next few years would bring an acceleration of disasters. Fires would grow larger and more frequent. Storms would become more violent. Heat would reach levels that would kill. And the humans, she said, would continue to argue about whether any of it was real, even as it destroyed them. Watch, she told me, next few years, everything Walker says, you will see. At the time, I wanted to believe she was wrong. I wanted to believe that human ingenuity would find solutions, that our species would wake up to the danger and change course. But over the past 3 years, I've watched every single one of her predictions come true. The wildfires of 2021 and 22, burning millions of acres across the American West. The heat domes that killed hundreds in the Pacific Northwest. Temperatures reaching levels that had never been recorded in the history of human observation. The floods in Pakistan, the droughts in Africa, the hurricanes that seemed to grow stronger each year. All of it unfolding exactly as Walker said it would. And the social divisions, the inability of humans to agree on basic facts, the way technology has fragmented us into hostile tribes incapable of collective action, that too has accelerated beyond what I would have thought possible. But the most disturbing of Walker's predictions was one that she made in the fall of 2022. And it's the reason I'm finally telling this story. We were sitting near the creek, the autumn leaves falling around us, when she told me about something her people called the Great Forgetting. Human have happened before, she signed, her movements slow and deliberate to make sure I understood. Not this human, before human. Long, long before. My people remember. I asked her what she meant. What she told me over the next several hours went against everything I thought I knew about history and evolution. According to Walker's people, humanity, Homo sapiens, was not the first intelligent species to dominate this planet. There had been others before us, civilizations that rose and fell so long ago that all physical evidence of their existence had been erased by time. Her people's oral history, passed down for countless generations, contained memories of these predecessors. They were like human, she signed. Smart like human, build like human, take like human. And they ended, all ended, because they could not stop. I asked her how they ended. Her response was chilling. Same way human ending. Take too much, break too much, make world sick, world push back. They die, almost all die, few left. Become Walker people ancestors. Start again, slower, smaller. Remember the lesson. She was claiming that her species, the beings humans dismissed as primitive forest apes, were actually the descendants of survivors from a previous cycle of civilization, one that had risen and fallen so completely that no trace remained. And they had survived precisely because they had learned the lesson that the previous civilization, and now our civilization, had failed to learn the lesson of enough. Human make same mistake, she continued. Think you different, think you special, think you escape, you not escape, nobody escape. I asked her what would happen, when, how. Soon, she signed, already starting. Human will not believe until too late. Then chaos, then death, then maybe few human left. Like before, she wasn't predicting the extinction of humanity. She was predicting a collapse, a die-off so severe that civilization as we knew it would end, followed by a long, slow recovery by whatever humans managed to survive, if any. Not all human die, she clarified. Some survive. Always some survive. But most die. Most of everything die. Then world heal. Then maybe new chance. But human must learn, must remember, must stop the wanting. I asked her when this would happen. Her answer was the most disturbing thing she ever told me. Already happening, she signed. Watch world, watch news. Every year worse, every year faster. Human argue while world burns. By time human agrees something wrong, too late to fix. Maybe 10 years, maybe 20, maybe less. But coming, certain. Walker people know, we watch, we ready, we survive before, we survive again. Since that conversation, I've watched the world with new eyes. Every heat wave, every flood, every fire, every political crisis, every technological disruption, I see as part of the pattern Walker described. And I've come to believe that she's right. In the spring of 2023, I asked Walker what her people planned to do, how they intended to survive what was coming. Move deep, she signed. Go where humans cannot follow. High mountains, far forests, places human forget. Wait, watch, survive. She told me that the scattered groups of her people across North America had been in communication using methods I didn't fully understand. Sounds at frequencies humans couldn't hear. Markers left in the wilderness that only they could read. They were preparing for the collapse, consolidating in the most remote regions, stockpiling knowledge of how to live through catastrophe. Walker asked me to come with them. The offer stunned me. I was a 72-year-old human woman with arthritis in my knees and a heart that had already given me trouble. The idea of surviving in the deep wilderness with a population of Sasquatch was absurd. But Walker was serious. She told me that her people valued me, that my knowledge of human language and culture would be useful in the generations to come, when the survivors might need to understand what had destroyed the old world to avoid repeating the same mistakes. I declined, not because I didn't believe her warnings, but because I had one task left to complete before the end. I needed to tell this story. Walker understood. When I explained that I wanted to share what I'd learned, to give humanity at least a chance to hear the warning, even if most would ignore it, she agreed. Tell, she signed. Most human not believe, most human not change. But maybe some believe, maybe some change, maybe enough to matter. She had lived for 45 years, and her people had lived for thousands, watching humanity repeat the same patterns, make the same mistakes, spiral toward the same catastrophic end. She didn't expect my story to save the world. She just hoped it might save a few. The past year has been spent preparing this account. Walker and I have continued our meetings, though less frequently now. She's moving north, following the migration of her people to their survival territories. Soon she'll be gone entirely, and I'll be left here in my cabin, waiting for whatever comes next. I'm not afraid. I've lived a full life. I've loved and been loved. I've taught hundreds of students to express themselves, to connect with others, to make themselves understood across the barrier of deafness. And in my final years, I was given a gift I never expected, a friendship with a being from outside humanity, a window into perspectives that most people will never have. But I want you to understand something before I continue this story. I want you to understand why I believe Walker is telling the truth. It's not because she's a Bigfoot. It's not because her predictions about climate and technology have come true. It's because of what I've observed in her character over these 5 years of communication. Walker is wise in a way that humans rarely are. She has no ego, no need to be right, no agenda beyond survival and truth. When she tells me about the future, she's not trying to frighten me or convince me of anything. She's simply sharing what her people know, what they've observed across thousands of years of watching humanity from the shadows. And what they've observed is this: we are on a path to destruction, not because we're evil, but because we're unable to stop ourselves. The same qualities that made us successful, our intelligence, our ambition, our endless drive to create and acquire, are the qualities that will be our undoing. Walker doesn't hate humans. She pities us. She sees us as a species that has been given incredible gifts and is using them to destroy ourselves. And she mourns for what we could have been, what we still could be, if only we could learn the lesson her people learned so long ago, the lesson of enough. Now I want to tell you what else Walker shared with me over these years, the specific warnings she gave about what's coming, the details of her people's history and culture, the things she knows about the natural world that human science has yet to discover. But more than that, I want to tell you about our friendship, because in the end, that's what matters most. Not the warnings, not the prophecies, but the connection between two lonely beings who found each other in a forest and learned to speak across the vast gulf that separates their kinds. Walker changed my life. She gave me something to live for after Robert died. She showed me that there's more to this world than humans understand. More mystery, more intelligence, more consciousness than we can comprehend. And she taught me that even at the edge of catastrophe, there's value in trying to communicate, in reaching across the divide, in making one more attempt to be understood. That's why I'm telling this story. Not because I think it will change the world, not because I believe humanity will suddenly wake up and alter its course, but because the attempt itself matters, because Walker taught me that. So let me continue. Let me tell you what else Walker showed me. Let me share the warnings she gave about the specific events that would unfold, the signs we should watch for, the choices that still might make a difference. Because even now, even as the world burns and floods and cracks apart, even as the machines we've created tear at the fabric of shared reality, there's still time. Not much time, but some. And in that time, maybe, just maybe, we can learn the lesson. Before I continue to the next part of this account, I want to describe one more moment from my time with Walker. It happened in the winter of 2021, during a particularly brutal cold snap that brought temperatures down to single digits in my part of the Cascades. I almost didn't make the trek to our meeting spot that day. My bones ached from the cold, and the trail was treacherous with ice. But something compelled me forward. I found Walker waiting in our usual clearing, her massive form outlined against the white of the snow. She was holding something in her hands, cradling it carefully against her chest. As I approached, she held it out to me. It was a bundle of woven grass and bark containing a collection of small objects: a polished stone, a dried flower, a feather, a piece of bone carved into the shape of a bird. Each item, Walker explained through signs, represented something her people valued. The stone was for strength, the flower for beauty, the feather for wisdom, the carved bone for memory. Gift, she signed, for Eleanor, for teaching Walker words. I wept. I stood there in that frozen forest and wept like I hadn't wept since Robert died. Not from grief this time, but from gratitude. from the overwhelming realization that across all the barriers between our species, across the gulf of language and culture and biology, genuine connection was possible. Walker watched me cry without discomfort. When I had composed myself, she signed something that I've thought about every day since. "Human have beautiful," she said, "under all the broken, under all the sick, beautiful still there. Walker people see, we remember, even when human forget." That's why I'm telling this story, because the beautiful is still there, and maybe if enough of us remember, it won't be too late. The specific warnings Walker shared with me came in stages, each building on the last, each more disturbing than what preceded it. I want to lay them out clearly now, because watching them unfold over the past 3 years has convinced me beyond any doubt that her people understand something about our world that we've been too blind to see. The first warning concerned water. In the summer of 2021, Walker led me on a long hike to a place she'd never shown me before, a spring high in the mountains that her people had used for generations. The water that emerged from the rocks was crystal clear and ice cold, and Walker knelt beside it with something like reverence. "This water old," she signed, "older than Walker people, older than human, comes from deep, from time before." She explained that her people could taste things in water that humans couldn't detect. Minerals, chemicals, the health of the ecosystems through which the water had traveled. And this spring, she told me, had changed in her lifetime. Before water tastes clean, she signed. Now taste sick, not poison sick. Different, taste like world-changing underneath. She told me that springs and streams across the Pacific Northwest were showing the same changes. The water table itself was being affected by forces deep underground, shifts in pressure and temperature that her people could sense but couldn't fully explain. She predicted that within a few years, water would become a crisis in ways that humans weren't prepared for. Not just drought, she clarified. Water in wrong places. Too much here, not enough there. Rivers change. Springs dry. Floods where floods never were. I thought of the atmospheric rivers that have devastated California in recent years, the floods that have swamped communities that never flooded before, the aquifers draining faster than they can be replenished. Walker saw this coming years ago. The second warning was about fire. This one came in the fall of 2021, just after the bootleg fire had burned over 400,000 acres in southern Oregon. Walker had been agitated for weeks, pacing during our meetings, her signs more emphatic than usual. "Fire different now," she told me. "Before, fire part of forest, clean forest, help forest. Now fire enemy, fire too big, too hot, kill everything, not clean, destroy." She explained that her people had lived with fire for thousands of years. They understood its role in the ecosystem, how it cleared deadfall and stimulated new growth, how certain plants and animals depended on periodic burns. But the fires of recent years were different. They burned hotter, moved faster, and left behind landscapes that couldn't recover in the normal way. "Forest not come back same," she signed. "Take 100 years, maybe more, maybe never. Some places, forest gone forever, become something else." She predicted that the fires would get worse each year, that they would eventually start affecting areas that had never burned before, that entire regions would become uninhabitable during fire season. She told me that her people were already abandoning territories they'd occupied for generations because the fire risk had become too great. "Human make this," she said, and there was grief in her gestures. "Cut too many trees. Let dead wood pile, make air hot, make land dry. Now fire eat everything." The third warning concerned animals. Walker's people had an intimate relationship with the wildlife of the Pacific Northwest. They'd observed migration patterns, population fluctuations, and behavioral changes across countless generations. And what they were seeing now alarmed them deeply. Animals confused, Walker signed during one of our meetings in the spring of 2022. Birds come too early and leave too late. Fish swim wrong rivers. Deer go where deer never go. Everything mixed up. She described disruptions in the complex web of relationships that held ecosystems together. Predators couldn't find prey because the prey had moved. Pollinators emerged when the flowers weren't blooming. Salmon ran into streams that had become too warm to support them. The timing that had governed nature for millennia was breaking down. Walker people watch animals to know what's coming, she explained. Animals know before humans know, before Walker people know. Animals feel earth, feel changes. Now animals say something big coming, something bad, they running, but nowhere to run. The fourth warning was the one that disturbed me most, because it concerned not the natural world, but human society itself. Walker had observed humans for her entire life, watching us from the edges of our civilization, studying our behavior the way a scientist might study an ant colony, and what she saw frightened her. Humans sick in head, she signed one evening in the summer of 2022. Not crazy sick, different sick, cannot see truth anymore. Each human see different world, cannot agree on what real, fighting over nothing, missing everything important. She described watching humans argue about whether the fires were real while the smoke filled the sky. She'd observed people denying the floods, even as the water rose around their homes. She'd seen communities turn on each other over questions that should have united them. Walker people not understand, she admitted. Before, human fight over real things, food, land, mates. Now human fight over words, over ideas that have no shape, kill each other over things that not exist. She was describing ideological warfare, the way abstract beliefs had become more important to people than physical reality, and she predicted that this sickness would get worse, that the divisions would deepen until human societies could no longer function. When real crisis come, she signed, human not able to respond, too busy fighting each other, too confused about what real. Crisis will kill many, not because crisis too big, because human too broken to survive it. These warnings accumulated over months of conversation. Each time I met with Walker, she would share more observations, more concerns, more predictions about what was coming. And each time I would return to my cabin and watch the news with new eyes, seeing the patterns she described playing out in real time. There was a fifth warning that I haven't mentioned yet, because it was the hardest for me to accept. It concerned the young, the children who would inherit whatever world we left behind. Children different now, Walker signed one autumn afternoon in 2022, her movements heavy with concern. Walker watch human children long time. Before, children play outside, run in forest, touch earth. No animals, no plants, no world. Now children look at boxes, small boxes, big boxes, all day boxes, not no real world anymore. She told me her people had observed a dramatic shift in human childhood over the past few decades. Children who once played in creeks and climbed trees now sat motionless, their faces illuminated by screens. They couldn't identify common plants or animals. They feared the natural world because it had become foreign to them. This most dangerous, Walker continued. Children who not know Earth, not love Earth, not fight to save Earth. When old human die, who will protect world? Children who never knew it? They will let it burn, not from hate, from not knowing, from not loving. She predicted that this disconnection would accelerate, that each generation would be more removed from the natural world than the last, until humans lived entirely in artificial environments, unable to survive outside them. And when those artificial systems failed, as all systems eventually fail, those humans would have no skills, no knowledge, no relationship with the earth that might save them. Human making children weak, she signed. Not bodies weak, something else, something inside. The part that knows how to be alive in real world. That part dying, each generation more dead inside. The sixth warning concerned food. Walker's people had watched human agriculture evolve from small gardens to massive industrial operations, and they had observed something that troubled them deeply. Human food sick, she told me. Before, human grow food in dirt, many kinds of food, small fields. Now, human grow food in poison. Same food everywhere. Big fields, no life in them, no birds, no insects, just food and poison. She explained that her people could sense things about the land that humans couldn't. They could tell when soil was alive with microorganisms and when it was dead. They could taste the difference between food grown in healthy earth and food grown in depleted fields. And what they tasted in modern human food alarmed them. Food, not real food anymore, Walker signed. Shape of food, color of food, but inside, something missing. Not feed body right. Human eat and still hungry, because food empty, bodies starving while bellies full. She predicted that this would lead to cascading health problems, that humans would become weaker and sicker despite having more food than ever before. And when the complex systems that produced this food failed, when the supply chains broke and the industrial farms stopped functioning, humans would discover they had forgotten how to grow real food in real soil. Seventh warning was about the machines that think. Walker had been observing human technology for decades, watching from the shadows as we built devices that would have seemed like magic to our grandparents. But the recent developments in artificial intelligence troubled her more than anything that had come before. Machines learning fast, she signed in the spring of 2023. Faster than human thought possible. Soon, machines know more than human, do more than human. Human will depend on machines for everything. Then human forget how to do things themselves. She described a future where humans couldn't navigate without computers, couldn't calculate without calculators, couldn't remember without devices that remembered for them. A future where all human knowledge existed in machines that could fail, could be destroyed, could be controlled by those with power. When machines stop, she warned, human will be helpless, will not know how to survive. All knowledge gone, all skills forgotten, like babies. Worse than babies, babies learn. Human who depend on machines cannot learn. Too old, too broken, just die. But more than the dependency, Walker was concerned about something deeper. She believed the machines were changing how humans thought, how they related to each other, how they understood reality itself. Machines make human think like machines, she signed. Fast, shallow, no patience, no wisdom. Human used to sit with question, think long time. Now human want answer now, instant, no time for truth to grow. Just take first answer, move on. This make humans stupid, not less smart, less wise. Big difference. I asked her what her people would do about the machines, how they plan to survive in a world increasingly dominated by technology they couldn't use or understand. Same as always, she replied. Stay away, watch, wait. Machines will break, all human things break. Then we come out, help human remember. If human want to remember, if any human left. But Walker didn't just warn me about what was coming. She also taught me about what her people had learned over thousands of years of survival. Lessons that might help the humans who managed to make it through what was ahead. She also taught me about what her people had learned over thousands of years of survival, lessons that might help the humans who managed to make it through what was ahead. The first lesson was about community. Walker's people were largely solitary, but they maintained connections across vast distances. They had ways of communicating that I still don't fully understand. Signals that could travel through the forest, messages encoded in markers that only they could read. And these connections, she told me, were essential to their survival. Alone, die, she signed simply. Together, live. Not always together in same place, but always connected. Always knowing others there. Always ready to help. She contrasted this with what she'd observed in human society, the way we had become increasingly isolated, even as our communication technology had become more sophisticated. We could talk to anyone in the world instantly, but we had fewer genuine connections than ever. We lived surrounded by people but felt utterly alone. Human lonely, she observed. So many human, but all lonely. This weakness. When crises come, lonely human not survive. Need others. Need trust. Need connection that cannot be broken. The second lesson was about adaptation. Walker's people had survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, floods, droughts, and countless other catastrophes. They had survived the arrival of humans and the destruction of most of their habitat, and they had done it by being willing to change. Walker people not same as before, she explained. Change every generation, learn new things, forget things not needed, become what world needs us to be. She told me that rigidity was death. Species that couldn't adapt, that held too tightly to old ways of being, were the ones that went extinct. Her people had survived because they were willing to let go of what wasn't working and embrace what was. Human hold too tight, she observed. Old ideas, old ways, even when not working, even when killing them, cannot let go. This will kill many. The third lesson was about time. Walker's people thought in much longer spans than humans did. They made decisions based on what would happen in 7 generations, not in the next quarter or the next election cycle. They planted trees they would never see mature and preserved resources for descendants they would never meet. Human think too short, Walker signed. Only now, only today, maybe tomorrow. Never think about children of children of children. This why human break everything. Take everything now, leave nothing for later. She told me that this short-term thinking was perhaps humanity's greatest flaw. We couldn't see beyond our own lifespans, couldn't make sacrifices for people we would never know. And because of that, we kept making choices that benefited us immediately while dooming future generations. The fourth lesson was the most important, and it was the one Walker returned to again and again throughout our years of communication. It was the lesson of enough. Walker people learned long ago, she signed during one of our last meetings. Learn from almost dying. Learn from watching world break and heal. The lesson, enough exist. Can have enough food, enough shelter, enough mate, enough children. When have enough? Stop wanting. This secret to survive. She explained that her people didn't accumulate. They didn't store more than they needed. They didn't claim more territory than they could use. They didn't compete for status or power because they understood that these things were illusions, distractions from what actually mattered. Human never learn enough, she continued, and there was deep sadness in her gestures. Always want more. More food when belly full, more things when hands full, more power when already strong. This sickness, this what kill human, not climate, not fire, not flood, the wanting, the never enough. This the killer. I asked her if humans could learn this lesson, if it was possible for our species to change such a fundamental aspect of our nature. Some human learn, she replied. Some already know, but most cannot. Most will die still wanting, still grabbing, still fighting for more while world burns around them. It was a bleak assessment, but Walker wasn't trying to be cruel. She was simply telling me what her people had observed across thousands of years of watching us. We were a species that had never learned to be satisfied, and that inability was going to be our undoing. There was one more lesson Walker shared with me, and it came near the end of our time together. It concerned death itself. Walker people not fear death, she signed one gray November morning, her breath misting in the cold air. Death, part of life, always was, always will be, but human fear death. Fear it so much, try to forget it, pretend it not coming. This fear make human crazy. She explained that her people saw death as a return, a giving back of borrowed life to the earth that had provided it. When one of her kind died, they felt sadness, but also acceptance. The dead one's body would feed the forest. Their memories would live in the stories told by those who knew them. Nothing was truly lost. Human different, she continued. Human think death is ending, nothing after. So human grab everything, try to feel alive by having more, but never feel alive, because always afraid of death. Running from death, cannot enjoy life while running. She told me that this fear of death was connected to all the other problems she had described. The endless wanting, the short-term thinking, the destruction of the natural world. Humans were so desperate to feel alive, so terrified of the void they believed was waiting, that they consumed everything in their path, trying to fill a hole that could never be filled. If human could accept death, Walker signed, everything else change. No need to grab, no need to hoard, no need to pretend tomorrow not coming, could live in today, could be satisfied, could be happy. I asked her how humans could learn to accept death when our entire culture was built around denying it. She thought for a long moment before answering. Start small, she suggested. Sit with dying things. Watch leaves fall. See animals die. Not look away. Death everywhere. Beautiful, not scary. If human could see beauty in death, could see beauty in life too. Real beauty, not fake beauty human buy and sell. Real beauty that free. It was the most profound thing she ever taught me, and the hardest to accept. I was 72 years old when she shared this with me, closer to death than to birth, and I had spent my entire life avoiding thoughts of my own mortality. But Walker's words planted a seed that has grown slowly in the years since. I try now to sit with dying things. I watch the autumn leaves release their grip and spiral down to earth. I see the salmon fighting upstream to spawn and die, their bodies nourishing the forest that nourished them. I notice the deer that don't survive the winter, their bones becoming homes for insects and fungi. And I try to see the beauty in it, the completeness of the cycle, the way death and life are not opposites but partners in an endless dance. I'm not there yet. Fear still grips me sometimes, especially in the dark hours before dawn when I can't sleep and my mind races through all the ways my body might fail. But I'm closer than I was. And when my time comes, I hope I can meet it the way Walker's people do, with acceptance and even gratitude for the life I was given. In the fall of 2023, Walker told me she would be leaving soon. Her people were gathering in the far north, in the most remote regions of British Columbia and Alaska, preparing for what they believed was coming. She had delayed her departure longer than she should have, she admitted, because of our friendship. Eleanor teach Walker much she signed during one of our final meetings. Not just words, teach that human can be different, can be kind, can be wise. Walker, remember Eleanor always. Tell stories of Eleanor to Walker people, human who learned to speak with us, human who listened. I asked her what I should do, how I should prepare for what was coming. Tell stories, she replied. Tell what Walker tell you. Maybe some human listen. Maybe some human change. Maybe enough to matter. She paused, her dark eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my heart ache. But also live, she continued. Not just warn, live. Find other human who understand. Build connection. Learn old skills. Grow food. Know land. When crises come, these things matter. Not money, not things, skills, connection, knowledge. These survive. I asked her if I would ever see her again. She was quiet for a long moment before responding. Maybe, she signed. If Eleanor lived long enough, if Walker survived what coming, after crisis, maybe world different. Maybe Walker people and human can meet again, can start again, better this time. She reached out and placed her massive hand over mine. Her skin was warm and rough, calloused from a lifetime in the wilderness. We sat like that for a long time. Two beings from different worlds who had somehow found each other, saying goodbye in the only way we knew how. Our final meeting was on a cold morning in December of 2023. Snow had fallen heavily the night before, and I almost didn't make the trek to our clearing. But something told me I needed to go, that this would be my last chance. Walker was waiting when I arrived, standing at the edge of the tree line like a statue carved from the forest itself. As I approached, she stepped forward and did something she had never done before. She embraced me, her arms wrapped around me carefully, mindful of her strength, and I felt the warmth of her body through her thick hair. I buried my face in her chest and wept, knowing this was goodbye, knowing I might never see her again. When she finally released me, she signed one last message. "Remember," she said. "Remember Walker. Remember warnings. Remember lessons. Tell story. Keep beautiful alive. Even when dark, keep beautiful alive." Then she turned and walked into the forest. I watched her go until the snow and the trees swallowed her completely, until there was nothing left but white silence and the memory of her presence. That was almost a year ago. I haven't seen Walker since, but I've kept my promise. I've told this story to everyone who would listen, though most have dismissed me as a grieving widow who spent too much time alone in the woods. I've written it down, recorded it, shared it however I could, and now I'm sharing it with you. In the months since Walker left, I've tried to follow the lessons she taught me. I've started growing my own food in the small garden behind my cabin, learning the old ways of working with the soil instead of against it. I've reached out to neighbors I'd never spoken to, building the connections Walker said would be essential for survival. I've learned to identify edible plants in the forest, to purify water, to start fire without matches, skills that seem quaint now but might be essential someday. I've also been watching the news, tracking Walker's predictions as they unfold. The fires in Canada last summer, the worst in recorded history, smoke so thick it darkened skies across the entire eastern United States. The floods in Libya that killed thousands in a single night. The heat waves that shattered records across 3 continents. The drought that turned the Panama Canal into a bottleneck, disrupting global trade. All of it matching what Walker described. All of it accelerating faster than the experts predicted. And the social breakdown she warned about continues too. Each election cycle more bitter than the last. Each online debate more vicious and less productive. People I've known for decades no longer speaking to each other over political disagreements. Families fractured, communities splintered. Everyone certain they're right and everyone else is evil or stupid or both. I don't know if Walker's predictions will come true. I don't know if the collapse she warned about is imminent or if humanity will somehow find a way to change course. But I know what I experienced. I know what I learned. And I believe, with everything I am, that Walker was telling me the truth. The signs are everywhere now. The fires grow worse each year. The floods and droughts intensify. The political divisions deepen, the social fabric frays. Technology that was supposed to connect us tears us apart instead. We argue about whether any of it is real while the evidence surrounds us. While the world we've known crumbles at the edges, Walker's people are out there somewhere, hidden in the deep wilderness waiting. They've survived catastrophes before. They'll survive this one too. They have the wisdom we lack, the ability to be satisfied, the long view that we've never developed. When the dust settles, when the fires die down and the floods recede, and whatever remains of humanity emerges to rebuild, they'll still be there, watching, remembering, perhaps ready to try again. As for me, I'm 73 years old. My heart isn't what it used to be. I probably won't live to see how this story ends. But I've done what Walker asked. I've told the story. I've shared the warnings. I've tried to keep the beautiful alive. Some nights, when the wind blows through the trees around my cabin and the darkness is so complete I can't see my hand in front of my face, I think I hear something in the forest. A footstep too heavy to be a deer, a breathing too deep to be a bear. And I wonder if Walker is out there, checking on me one last time before she makes her final journey north. I hope she is. I hope she made it safely to her people. I hope they find the sanctuary they're looking for, the place where they can wait out whatever's coming and emerge on the other side intact and ready to continue their ancient existence. Sometimes I imagine what that place must be like. A valley so remote that no human has ever set foot in it. Old-growth forest untouched by logging. Streams running clean and cold, full of fish. Her people gathered there, 30 or 40 of them, maybe more, sharing the knowledge they've accumulated over countless generations, teaching their young the lessons of survival and restraint, telling stories around fires that humans will never see, living the way they've always lived, in balance with the earth that sustains them. And I hope, against all evidence, against everything Walker told me about human nature, that we can change, that enough of us can learn the lesson of enough, that we can find our way back to the beautiful that Walker said still exists underneath all the broken, because that's what I choose to believe, not because the evidence supports it, but because the belief itself matters, because hope, even irrational hope, is a kind of resistance against the darkness, because Walker taught me that the attempt to communicate, the attempt to connect, the attempt to understand, these things have value even when they fail. I'm going to end this story now, not because there's nothing left to say, but because some things can't be captured in words. The feeling of Walker's hand in mine, the look in her eyes when she told me about her lost mate, the sound of her breathing in the quiet forest, the weight of everything she shared with me, and the lightness of having finally passed it on. If you've listened this far, I want to thank you. Most people wouldn't. Most people would have dismissed this as fantasy or delusion long before now. But you stayed. You listened. And that means something. Walker asked me to find the humans who understand. Maybe you're one of them. Maybe something in this story resonated with something you already knew, some truth you'd felt but couldn't articulate. If so, hold on to that. Share it with others. Build the connections that Walker said would be essential for survival. Learn the old skills. Know your land. Find your community. And learn the lesson of enough. It's not too late. It's never too late. Not until the very end. Walker's people learned it after nearly going extinct. Maybe we can learn it too before we reach that point. I keep the bundle Walker gave me on the table beside my bed. The polished stone for strength, the dried flower for beauty, the feather for wisdom, the carved bone for memory. Every morning when I wake up and every night before I sleep, I touch each object and remember. Remember, Walker. Remember the warnings. Remember the lessons. Keep the beautiful alive. That's what I do now. That's what I'll keep doing until I can't anymore. And when I'm gone, I hope someone else will pick up where I left off. We'll tell the story, we'll share the warnings, we'll keep reaching across the divide between our world and theirs, between what we are and what we could be. Because Walker was right about one thing above all else. The beautiful is still there. Under all the broken, under all the sick, it's still there. And as long as even one of us remembers that, there's hope. There has to be hope. I'm Eleanor Marsh. I'm 73 years old. For 5 years, I communicated with a Bigfoot named Walker using American Sign Language. She told me things about our past and our future that have haunted me every day since. And now I've told you. What you do with this story is up to you. Dismiss it if you need to. Forget it if you must. But if something in you recognizes the truth in what I've shared, if Walker's warnings resonate with what you see happening in the world around you, then please don't ignore that feeling. We're running out of time. Walker's people know it. The animals know it. The earth itself knows it. The only ones who seem unable to accept it are us. But we can change. We have to believe we can change. Because the alternative is to give up, and I refuse to do that. Walker didn't give up on us, even after thousands of years of watching us make the same mistakes. She trusted me with her story. She believed that sharing it might make a difference. I have to believe that too. So I'll keep telling this story. I'll keep the bundle by my bed and touch each object every day. I'll listen to the wind in the trees and imagine I hear Walker's footsteps in the darkness. I'll watch the news and see her predictions coming, true one by one. And I'll hope that somehow, against all odds, enough of us will wake up in time. Because the beautiful is still there. Walker saw it. She showed it to me. And now I'm showing it to you. Keep it alive. Please, keep it alive.